The AmaPiano Getto Blaster 6000. This video is going to be dedicated towards really large, big 21-inch drivers capable of going really low on a shoestring budget. There is this misbelief or belief that AmaPiano bass lines go deeper and hits harder than any other music genre that we have worldwide or locally, regardless of how you want to look at it. But that is complete and utter nonsense. There is plenty music that has bass well below 35-40 hertz, which is quite common in dance music as a whole. So, when I speak to stores and dealers about some products and what's happening in the market, they also, this AmaPiano stuff, the guys just want the subs to go very low. I ask, but what are you offering them? And they kind of give me a list of products and they say, but it doesn't go that low. So I want to cover a couple of things very important when it comes to making deep bass. Is one, 18s, while they go very low, if you want really deep bass, you need to get a bigger speaker, and 21s start to represent that better. And my choice for this is going to be a very well priced driver from Lavoce. This is the SAF214.50. I will absolutely emphasize this is not a premium driver out of the Lavoce range, but value for money. This driver is capable of going all the way down to 30 hertz and doing so relatively efficiently. The downside, however, is the fact that this particular driver recommended is to be loaded into a box that is 300 liters. That is roughly the same size of a double 18. So keep in mind, you are going to be trading off a really big box for a single speaker just to get a little bit lower in frequency. So that is something that a lot of the hi-fi guys understand, is that if you want to go really low, you need a really big box, right? People like to refer to it as a Hoffman's iron law, which I think is a terrible context about subs, but whatever the case is. So 300 liters tuned to 33 hertz is a pretty big box, but that's what we are going to need to get down to these low 30s. So typically speaking, if you have a subwoofer that can play down to 40 hertz relatively well, it will do so with absolute authority. However, as you come a little bit lower down to 35 hertz, 30 hertz, things start becoming pretty hard for any speaker, generally speaking. So what I've done is I've already whacked in the driver into a default WinISD cabinet, and I'm going to do this live with you, hopefully relatively quickly, because it is pretty late on Friday evening. I'm trying to squeeze in a little bit more videos. So 300 liters tuned to 33 hertz. You can see we have this rise over here. This is what we refer to as a high Q, right? So this driver could in fact play a little bit deeper. Let's go out to 400 hertz, and let's 400 liters, and let's tune this down to 30. You can see we can in fact get down really low, but do we want to get down that low? Well, not necessarily. Okay, so 300 liters, guys. I will make these plans available to you if you want. That's no problem, just give me a shout, or you know what, I will give the plans to you if you buy the driver from our website. They sell over for just about 6,300 rand, somewhere around there. My opinion, again, best value for money 21 on the market. Right, so we got to jump into a couple of things here. So let's quickly have a run through of the driver. Driver has a 4.5-inch voice coil, so not the biggest voice coils, and I can understand why guys do that, because we're trying to keep the motor force relatively high. We don't want to increase the mass too much. Big voice coils means lots of length of copper. Things become heavy very fast. Inductance goes up very high. 4,000 watts program power. Program power is for sissies. We want to look at AES. So AES rating of 2,000 watts. So typically speaking, if we put about 500 watts RMS to this with 6 dBs worth of dynamic range, we should be floating around our AES We can obviously put a lot more into that, so we just got to keep in mind that we are going to run into Excursion and everything else. But if you want a happy-go-lucky driver, yeah, let's have a look here. All right, 12.5 millimeters with cone displacement. It's a fair amount of cone displacement. Again, guys, always look at the fine print, see how they come up to this voice coil or this X-Max value. So it should come out to just over 8 mils out of the voice coil divided by 2 plus the gap out divided by 4. Yeah, so somewhere around about 8 mils. Power handling, they are rated out to 2000. Okay, cool. So very important, again, I've mentioned in some previous videos, is the driver's resonant frequency, 33 hertz, which again is relatively low, right? Most 18s are like 35 hertz, a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit higher than 40 hertz. This driver is a slightly higher Q, right? So electrically as well as your QTS. So what this means is basically we're going to get a slightly bumped response, right, in which we can kind of see don't want to open up equalizer APO, right? So you can see with the given box we've got a high Q. This is very typical with car audio subwoofers, not so much PA, but we're going to work with it, right? So we've got this driver in here. Let's go and have a look at things like our cone excursion signal. Let's go and have a look. So they rate 2000, so I'm going to be guessing we're going to be sitting at about 1300, somewhere around there. A little bit short, 1400 watts. Okay, so how did I come out to 1400 watts? Well, basically I have used the box suggested volume, right, which is 300 liters tuned to 33 hertz, right, and I have just approximated roughly where I think X-Max is going to top out. Now, something that is very important when you get into your speaker box design and using something like WinISD or any tool for that matter of fact, guys, if you are tuning very low, it's important to understand that that driver will hit peak displacement sooner. So there is a fine line between how deep we go and how loud we can turn things up. Generally speaking, the bigger the box is, the less loud we get, but we do increase the overall efficiency in the lower region. So that is something that you need to often consider, which some people don't consider. So what happens is you find that you can't turn it up very loud because it starts to run out of mechanical displacement. Right, so now that we've got that in place, we need to consider things like the port. So we've got a default port, and one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to start to scale the port so that our vent velocity comes down to about 16 meters per second. So because we have got a 21-inch driver, our overall outer diameter is 547 millimeters. So we're going to work on a face that's, say, roughly about 600. So I am going to come into here and I'm going to say we are going to have a port that is roughly 600 millimeters wide, and about 140 should keep us okay. That's close enough, right? So we're just crossing the threshold of 16 meters per second on our vent velocity using 1400 watts worth of input power. So generally speaking, I'm quite happy with that. Right, and what we want to do is we want to come down here to our cone excursion, and we need to start to consider that, yes, you know, we're just hitting cone displacement over here. Driver's quite happy to do that, but we want to protect this back portion of the driver, right? This is where all the infra bass is and your subharmonic bass, and we need to protect the driver from over excursion. Now, when you go and download plans for, let's say, an 18 sound driver, you will see that often they will take a speaker array, put it into a box design, and they will give you processor settings. This will also apply if you go out and go buy a JBL rig or an RCF rig. It comes with amplifiers and processors and all of that stuff. And when you go and plug in your system, and let's say, for example, you've got a pair of SRX 728/18s, and you go up to your DBX and you can actually tell the DBX, listen, these are the speakers that I have, you know, and enter that information in. And what it is basically doing is add in filters and presets to try and get that speaker to, one, respond very accurately, make slight corrections to the frequency response, as well as protect the driver. In this particular instance, because we're designing the box from scratch, we are going to be adding a high pass. A high pass, if I'm reading the graph from left to right, is removing the low frequencies, only allowing the high frequencies to come through. If it was a low pass, right, it basically will only let the low frequencies through. If I'm reading from the high frequencies to the low frequencies, right, so all of the high frequencies are being blocked out because we are reading the opposite direction. Okay, that's the way I like to remember it. So we want a high pass. All right, your networks is not so much of an important thing. We're going to stay away from Link-Fitz-Riley because Link-Fitz-Riley is a bit of a complicated one. I know people sometimes just go there for whatever reason. Bless old Mr. Link-Fitz. Yeah, ingenious of a character. Someone that I think is going to be missed by many people in the industry. Okay, so what value do we put down? All right, now I've just gone to first order 40 hertz, but it doesn't really matter too much. Let's just go back down to 20 hertz first order, right? And filter on, filter off. Filter on, filter off. One of the things that you'll notice is we are starting to get a change in cone displacement, right? As we come up in frequency, so we will start to protect the driver even better. Now you can see our filter is set to 20 hertz, and this order is basically the aggression, right? So if I was to go from 100 hertz to 50 hertz, that could be an octave. If we go from 200 hertz to 100 hertz, that in fact is an octave. We could even go from 60 hertz to 30 hertz. That would also be considered an octave. An octave is every doubling or halving of frequency going down the scale, right? So a second order would basically mean we are rolling off at a rate of 6 dBs. So between point A and point B, we are going to have a slope which might be flat over here and 6 dBs as we get to 50 hertz. Right, so let's jump up to a second order. Right, now this is going at a rate of 12 dBs. A third order would be 18 dBs. Right, and you can see we're not necessarily getting any better. We are in fact getting a higher peak, and this is what we want to try and avoid. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to start to creep up, and let's go to 25 hertz. Right, let's see if this gets any better. A second order, right, looks a little bit better than our first order. That's kind of looking a little bit better. Fourth order, again 6, 12, 18, 24 dBs per octave. We can see we're still not quite getting, it's getting close, but not quite there yet. So as you learn about filters, guys, start this off really slowly, because we've already said to the software we want X amount of power in here. And now this becomes about speaker protection. Ooh, okay, so second order at 30 hertz is already starting to look very, very good. Now we could in fact see if a third order would be a little bit better, and in fact it is. Right, let's quickly jump across and have a look what it is doing to our overall response. So let's have a look at a third order versus our second. Right, third order versus our it's going to give me a hard time now. Third order versus our second. You can see that there is a very small difference. Now this would be a relatively good start at bringing in our cone excursion, right? So again, this is going to affect our overall power handling. I don't like running speakers to the absolute limit because I want to avoid things like power compression and everything else. And if I have a look at 1,000 watts, which is half of our maximum rated power, which is a pretty high value still. Typically speaking, I might run somewhere around about 500 watts, maybe a little bit more. Somewhere around about possibly about 65, maybe 70 volts on the top side, depending on the amount of time that we're going to run things. So I'm kind of happy with the order that we have over here, right? So I know somewhere in between that region, we're going to be keeping cone displacement relatively good. Our air velocity is also going to jump down. So if we wanted to, we could in fact consider making this port a little bit smaller, right? So I could come in here and say 120. You can see we've shortened by 20 mils. Our overall port becomes slightly smaller, and our vent resonance is also going to push up, which actually is quite an important thing to bring up quickly. Guys, it is very important, especially for the people who are doing hi-fi. Vent size is actually something that is quite critical, and a lot of times people get wrong, purely because your resonance modes of your port will often start messing you around, and will start floating in between your crossover points. And if you don't push it out high enough, especially if it's very audible, it's kind of stuck there. You can't remove it. Once it's there, it's there. So keep that in mind. That's why you'll often see on like really expensive speakers, or speakers that are critically designed, is you might find that you have a 15-inch driver or a 12-inch driver, and it might have multiple little small ports. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep this resonance well out of the audible range, and away from crossover points. So okay, so you know what, for the sake of things, we're going to keep this out at 120 mils is fine. Okay, so let's go and jump into our drawing package, which is going to be Fusion 360. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the speaker from the top down, right? Just to simplify things. Now, remember the size of our cabinet, or the size of our driver. We are on 21 inch, so we're 547 mils to the very top of this side and the very bottom of that side in diameter. So if we use a face that is roughly 600 mils, we 100% know that we're going to fit on there. So what I'm going to do is I am going to draw in some form of rectangle, come square. I'm just zooming out quickly. So if we say 600 millimeters wide, right, and let's make this guy 800 millimeters deep, or 80 centimeters deep, right, and click OK. We now need to start adding in some more pieces to this. So the first thing that I'm going to start to add on here is I'm going to start to add on some side panels, right? So again, we're looking at the driver from the top down. Now I can manually enter in the thickness of our material, right, and snap things into place. Or I could do the following, and I'm going to just tell that it's a lock to that. I can also come down, whoops, it isn't, to here, change FX parameters, add in a new parameter, and I'm going to write in here thickness. I'm going to give this a value, in this case 18 millimeters, which is the thickness of our wood, right? I just want to come here and retell this that it must be the thickness of our material. The nice thing about doing it like this is we can change the thickness of our material at any given size, and it will actually change the overall size of our cabinet, which is really handy. Okay, again, I'm going to just type in thickness, hit enter. It's going to lock that in. I'm going to come back down here. This may be a long video, guys. I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible and make this available to you guys. Right, again, the same thing. I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to write in the thickness. I'm going to come there, and I'm going to say, please, you need to join up over there. All right, now we need to put our face down. So I'm not going to come all the way to the front here. I'm going to come somewhere over here. Right, and I'm going to say you need to be the thickness of the material again. I'm going to click that down there, and I'm going to snap this to the side, right? And you'll see that this still remains blue. In other words, I can move this backwards and forwards. So we need to give some form of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make like so, and I'm going to say, hey man, I want you to be about 40 millimeters from the front of that box. Bang. All right, now everything's locked into place, and we have drawn this basis of our sketch out. So if you can imagine, here is going to be the front of the speaker box, the side, the back, and the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click and hold, drag it across here, and I'm going to hit E to extrude. Right, now you can see it's going to want to extrude up. So what happens if it extrudes up is that my sketch is going to be at the bottom of the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come the opposite way around, right? And I'm going to say minus the thickness of our material, hit enter, and that is going to give me the ability, if we come back here to sketches, for our sketch to remain on top. Now here's where things get tricky, because how do we work out 300 liters? All we have is a plank with some rough dimensions on them. Well, the fastest way to start to look at this is to start to extrude volumes. So what I'm going to do is, let's just come up to the top here, right? So we're looking at the box from the middle down, or from the top down, and I'm going to hit extrude again, and I'm going to give this a distance. Now we know that our speaker can fit on our panel width-wise, so we know 600 is going to work. You with me? Right. Now let's consider that our box, or our port, we were actually right there, is going to be 120 millimeters in height, right? So let's go and start adding in some extra stuff. So we've gone 600 because we know that's what's going to fit, plus 120 mils, right? Plus the thickness of our material, and I'm just going to, in this case, write in 18. Okay. So our box internal is roughly 738 mils, and I'm going to click OK. But before I do that, I want to go new body. Now what this has done is it's given us the inside volume of our cabinet, right? And of course we can change our box size at any given point, so hopefully we are close enough. I'm going to change the document from millimeters to meters, purely because Fusion gives you the scientific. So if you're not used to scientific, which 99.999% of you are not going to be familiar with, it's going to be confusing as F, right? Okay, so what do we do now? We've now changed this into units of meters. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to this body, right, and I'm going to click on this body over here, and I'm going to go to properties, and you can see we have in fact come out to 300 liters. Now remember, they said that our overall box volume needs to be 300 liters. This basically means that we need to make some changes, right, because we are going to start to add in our ports, and I'm going to leave this in here because I want to show you what's going to happen, right? So our overall height, I'm going to keep that in there for a second. I'm going to come down to our face, and I'm going to go extrude. I'm going to hold shift and click on the top here, and I'm going to, for my instance, say new component, right? And that you can see is now 2 parts. Now I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to create a new sketch, right? So we know we've got our base, and we are going to draw some guidelines. I like to draw in guidelines. You don't have to draw in guidelines. You'll see it brings up a little triangle. That's going to mean it's going to be on the square. Okay, when it's dotted lines, it is going to be a guidelines, right? We don't need to actually draw that in. Let's go back over here. Let's make that like so. Our overall diameter on our speaker was 547, so let's make that 547. Where are we? Losing my space here. Let's just change this back down to millimeters so you guys can see the process, right? So 547, we are getting close to building our AmaPiano Getto Blaster 6000 gens. Okay. Our ports, what were our ports? Our ports had an internal height of 120 mils. So we're going to come back here, and we are going to draw in 18 mils, right, somewhere over here. And we're going to say tab, this must be the thickness of our material. Thank you very much. And I want to say that from here to this line over here must be 120 millimeters. Okay, so you can see everything fits on quite nicely. Now here's where things get complicated, fellas, right? Remember, we had 300 liters exactly. How deep was our port, right? Our port was 437.8, so we're going to make it 438 mils, right? 438 mils. We're going to go extrude minus 438 millimeters, and we're going to cut that space away. Making sense? Okay, now we're going to go back into meters, because it's going to, you know what, let me actually show you. Bodies, cancel, sorry, bodies, properties. Can you see how I was saying 2.729 E plus 0.8, right? We, with a bit of practice, it's comfortable to say that we are 272 liters. So you can see we just don't quite have the volume, right? It's easier to look at it in meters as you start to begin. It really does simplify the volume side of things. Properties, and you can see straightforward is 0.273, or 273 liters. So we need to make our box a little bit bigger. Okay, because remember, we're still going to minus like 11 liters off of our cabinet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my sketch. Now I have a couple of options. I can in fact make this a little bit deeper. So let's do that. Let's make this 900 millimeters, right? Ooh, failed because it is locked. Now remember those constraints that we had in, right? Because of these constraints, we are locking things over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some new parameters, right? And I'm going to say depth, right? And we currently have a depth of 800, so we're going to work with 800 just to keep it simple. So again, I don't expect you guys to follow along, and I'm going to write here depth. Okay. Now if I come in here and I say whoops daisy, actually not there, I can come down to here, and I'm going to change this from 800 to 900. Did you see our box got bigger? So what I can do is I can come back into our sketch, right? And you have a look, our volume has in fact followed through with the entirety of our cabinet. So now if we have a look at our properties, we are 314 liters. Let me change this again back into meters for you guys, so it's a little bit easier. Right, there we go, properties. And we are 0.315 meters. And our driver is going to take up 11.85. So let's come here and start typing in calculator. Right, and we can type in 0.315 or 315 minus our speaker, which was 11.85, 11.85 brings us down to 303 liters, which is very close to our 299 liters. Now I know I'm going to put some bracing into this cabinet, and the likelihood is I will start to drop out this 3 liters pretty quickly. Okay, so now that we know that our sizing is roughly in place, I'm going to remove this guy over here. We can keep it, you know what, we'll keep it, we'll just hide it, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue with the rest of our box. I'm going to click here, I'm going to go E to extrude, come up to here, and I'm going to say new component. Now I know this is possibly not the right way, but this is the way that I do it. Everything is supposed to be in bodies, and bodies generate more components, and blah 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 blah. Yeah, I know, right? But for the sake of things, I get it done in any case, right? So we are missing a sketch. Now remember, we have our body, right? And we did not remove that volume from our body, because this in fact is going to come out. And we can do this actually in two ways. We can come over here, we can extrude this by, what was our depth on our port again. 437 mils. Okay, minus 437 mils. Whoa, somewhere along the line we've clicked on oh yes, we are in meters. 0 point. Right, and we can cut away because we do have a volume there, or we can simply just go new components, and there's our port. Right, so here is the basis of our box, and now we need to put a top on here. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. The way I'm going to do this right here is I just want to make like so, and this was our first body that we extruded. For the sake of things, I like to invariably convert this back into a component, but we don't necessarily have to. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go right click, and I'm going to go paste. Right, now I can grab this, I'm going to bring it all the way up here. I'm going to come over here, click on that corner, say okay, and I want this to come down. Right, and I'm going to go point to point. I'm going to click on that point, click on up that point over there. It's going to lock everything in place, and there you have it, guys. There is very quickly a box for a 21-inch super AmaPiano Getto Blaster 6000. So pretty straightforward. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense to you guys. I will make this available to everyone. For the sake of this, I know it's going to already be a long video, but I'm going to show you some of the other processes that I'm going to do as we lay things out. Next thing we need to consider is, hey man, like how much material are we going to use? So I know a lot of you guys are going to use shutter plywood, which is the shattest of plywood in the market. Guys, stop using shutter ply. Like, I understand it's plywood, but there are better pliers. Spend the extra money, guys. I promise you, it is so worthwhile. Plywood, or that plywood has been designed to, you know, guys pour concrete. Like, they put it down as a barrier. You pour concrete. It's throwaway materials, not necessarily good for speaker boxes. Okay, so we need to add some items. So let's give this thing a name. Top and bottom, right? Now we need to take some of these dimensions. We're going to enter these dimensions in here. We're going to go inspect, right? We are, let's go and change this back into millimeters, because that's how we do things. Millimeters, right? So we are inspect 900 deep by our overall width, which is 900 by 600, right? So I'm going to come back here into our tool, and I'm going to say the length is 900, our width is 600. There's a top and a bottom, so I need to have this times 2. We need to select some form of material, and I'm just going to go plywood for the sake of plywood, right? And I'm going to click save. Right, now what else do we need? We have our top and our bottom. Okay, let's go and consider our side. Now we know we are 900 deep, so we don't need to take that measurement twice. I'm going to click on this side panel here. We are 738 tall. Right, so I'm going to come in, add side panels. Okay, we're 900 long by 738 millimeters tall, and there are 2 sides to our box. Come on, 2 sides to our box, and I'm going to click save. Right, so we're going to come back here. What else do we need to do? So you know what, I'm going to hide this component over here just to simplify things, and hide this component over here because we've already added these things in. So I'm clearing up my view so I don't confuse myself. You don't have to do that, but I just do it in any case. So we need to measure out a rear panel. We know we are 600 wide, again by 738. So let's come up here, and we're going to go add rear panel. Right, we are 738 by 600 millimeters wide. We only have one rear panel. Okay, so we can do it like so. Let's remove this guy over here. We need to take the dimensions for our face, and we are going to be not 738, my friend. Hang on a minute. Let's go from, ooh, I see a small problem here because I didn't do that right for you guys in the video. Okay, so the height of our face is 582 millimeters. Okay, just be aware, guys, there's a problem here because I didn't cut this off. So but for the sake of this, you should be fine. So we were 582, right? Add the face, which is going to be 582 by 600. We're going to hit save. Now the last thing we need to do is to add in our port. Again, it is critical on a cabinet this size to put in bracing, right? You don't want to have a box with no bracing in, generally speaking. Okay, so we are going to go from this front section over here all the way down to over here, which is going to be 437. So again, coming back to our software, we're going to go add. This is going to be our port, and we are going to have a length of, what is it, 437? Was that right? Hey, 437, and let's go and have a look here. 437. I'm not too worried about the 0.8. To be honest with you, where am I going? 437. Okay, so 437 by 600. Okie dokie. And we are going to go optimize, and you can see we are going to be 2 sheets, right, for one of our Getto Blaster 2000s. Now I'm going to make this available free for you to download on Facebook. But if you want to find out more about what we can do for this box, you are going to have to follow my video on YouTube. So thank you very much, and see you later.